Look at the shiny, shiny.
About time, am I right? It really shouldn't have taken just over 3 months since the game's release for me to make a run on it, but there were a few reasons at play. First off, I wanted to give people time to obviously play through it themselves. Spoilers are the worst, and I did not want to be the one to ruin the game in that aspect for some people. On top of that, other things just kept getting in the way, like other planned videos, having to get the new PC I mentioned in the Lincoln video, as well as getting sick near the end of October. But enough about that, let's get to why you're here. So, can you beat Starfield with only the cutter? That's its official name, but I, and a lot of other people I've spoken to, kind of keep referring to it as the mining laser, as that's what it does, so either of those names really work. Anyway, the cutter is more so a tool than a weapon, as the name would imply. It's for mining or cutting up metals and other materials. That said, it does have a base damage of 4, so it is capable of inflicting damage, hence why we are here today. If I had to compare it to something, it's kind of like the Recharger rifle from New Vegas. Not incredibly strong on its own, but it does have some unique properties to help it stand out. And just like that rifle, it has infinite ammo. You just have to wait a few seconds for it to recharge. You cannot aim down sights with the thing, unfortunately, but the trade-off for that is that holding down the left trigger charges the beam to be more powerful. This is indicated by the reticle getting a bit smaller. It uses more energy per second this way, but I'm pretty sure the boost in damage is worth it. For those of you curious, the reason that this is the first Starfield run is simply down to it being the most requested in the comments of other videos. So that about covers the basics, and with all that out of the way, let's begin. Thankfully, the game begins with us on an elevator and not in the back of a horse and cart, so we can be about 70% certain that this isn't just Skyrim again. After a brief chat with our mining supervisor, we get control. Kinda like how in Fallout 4 you can speed through the vault introduction by just walking past the NPCs, you can do something similar here by just walking straight for the cutter. As soon as we pick it up, we can start moving at full speed. Also, this has to be the fastest we have ever acquired a weapon for one of these restricted runs, so thankfully I won't have to dance around enemies while trying to find the weapon. After mining and then waiting for a bit, the nearby machinery digs through a new part of the cave. We can then sprint through here yet again, ignoring everyone, and then reach the end where we can clear out some sparkly rocks to then touch this artifact and briefly ascend to a field of stars. This leads into character creation. The look doesn't really matter, I just go with my usual, and then it's on to picking a background. The background itself isn't too important outside of some unique interactions you might get from certain people. In the terms of this run, we do want one that lets us start with a laser skill. This will let us get just a little bit of extra damage out of the cutter. This means we have 3 choices, either the cyberneticist, explorer, or xenobiologist. I ended up going with the cyberneticist simply because the other primary skills, medicine and security, felt like they would be the most useful. Finally, for traits, I kept things simple and just took hero worshipped. The others all come with pros and cons as you can imagine, but for my first run I was just keeping things simple. Plus I wasn't really sure which ones would be entirely beneficial if I'm being honest. In terms of character names, I kinda chose this without really thinking. The cutter doesn't really pew pew like a normal laser gun, but rather it's more like a you know? Anyway, I eat a co-worker's sandwich, more than likely getting written up for that, and then step outside for the very first time where we meet Barrett, a member of Constellation and important character number 1 in herding us towards the plot. He wants us to take the artifact we just found to the other members of his little club on New Atlantis, but before we can do that, pirates. This is our first taste of combat, and as such, for now, the weapon is more than sufficient. That is, damage-wise, I should stress. The range, despite being a literal laser, is incredibly short. For now, that's not much of an issue to be fair, just might need to look into better armor and defense perks if I'm going to be getting up close and personal with everything. Once the pirates are all roasty toasty, I go back and check in with Barrett, who is so pleased with our work that he gives us his spaceship along with a Rolex. Vasco, his robot helper and my personal favourite companion, is also thrown in as a reward too. Once we get into outer space, we are greeted with the space combat tutorial. Now, you can skip the initial section of this by just powering up all of your ship's systems at once. However, that does not skip the final, test section of the tutorial, which is to take out 2 Crimson Fleet ships at once. As far as I'm aware, there is no way to avoid this, so I have to use the ship's weapons to take them out. Figured something like this was probably going to happen. It's like the Rad Roach in Fallout 3, except there is no way for me to turn into a child and skip it. So you could say the challenge is already failed before it began, but to circle back around to the Radroach comparison, since this is a similar scenario, that being a tutorial, I think, just like the Vault section in Fallout 3, this is our one free pass, so to speak. There is technically a way to skip this via New Game Plus, as you can start right after the entire intro section, but I feel like that opens up a whole other can of worms. Anyway, I deal with the two ships, and then me and Vasco head off to deal with the pirates on their nearby moon base. I greet some of the wildlife for fun, and then get to where this weapon excels, indoor corridor combat. The weapon still cuts through the low-level pirates, and as a result, allows me to strip them for some better armor. I'm more here for the cosmetic upgrade if I'm being real. After enough of them have just been eviscerated by me, I take the time to do some digi-picking, that's Starfield's version of lockpicking, a little more involved than Skyrim or Fallout system, and I actually enjoy it quite a lot. Inside the unlocked container, we find our very first legendary weapon. That we naturally cannot use. But, more importantly, the XP from safecracking was enough to get us to level 2. We don't use the skill point yet, and it's because of Starfield's leveling system. It's like this weird combination of both Fallouts and Elder Scrolls. While it's XP level based like Fallout, and is set out in a similar manner to Fallout 4 with how each perk has multiple levels, you cannot take the next level of a perk without fulfilling some requirements. More often than not, it's just to use the skill in question multiple times, kinda like how you would level up skills in Elder Scrolls. The system definitely has its flaws, but in situations like this where I primarily only want to focus on one skill, that being lasers, it allows me to basically grind it out all the way to max rather than it being locked behind an arbitrary player level like in Fallout 4. I quickly go and get the 7 last kills that I'll need with a mining laser to meet the second level skill requirements, allowing me to access a next rank in the perk, which grants 10% more damage with laser weapons. For the mining laser, that means it hops from 4 to 5 damage. Incredible! Reaching the top of the base, we meet the leader of this group of miscreants, Brogan. I cut the communications short and just get to melting. Brogan is our first legendary enemy. I don't actually know if that's what they're called in Starfield, but they work almost identically to legendary enemies in Fallout 4. That being, they have more health and drop random rare pieces of equipment, so I'm calling them legendary enemies. That does not mean they are difficult, I should stress. Brogan here gets immediately stunned and down thanks to the cutter and the nearby explosive barrel, leaving him groveling for most of the fight, until the weapon recharges enough for me to put him out of his misery. With their leader dead, I took a moment to hunt down the last of the pirates, and then could leave the moon and continue on with the main quest. Except that's not what happened, and instead I went searching for the Terramorph that has escaped this moon base and murdered all of the scientists. I don't need to find and kill it, it's not even a side quest or anything, but I did so on my first playthrough, and I remember it gave me a whole bunch of experience, and I figured that would be a reward enough in itself of today. On the way to the quest not quest, I ended up getting distracted by another base the pirates had claimed on this moon. I decided to quickly wipe it off the map too. After all, I do need kills to level up the perks some more, and life is made equal when it comes to skill increases. After a few more random indigenous life forms fall before me, I can take rank 3 in lasers, all before really starting the main story. While that part worked out quite well, my plan to hunt down the Terramorph did not. While I was able to track it down, by the time I got to the creature, it was in a fight with some Varun zealots, who unfortunately inflicted most of the damage, and as a result, even though I managed to land the killing blow, I didn't get any experience. It's pretty disappointing, but nothing I can do about it, so for now, me and Vasco return to our ship and fly our way over to New Atlantis to begin the story proper. First things first, the instant I arrive, I sell just about everything I looted that wasn't my cutter or healing supplies. Money's not going to be too important, as med packs are rather plentiful if you know where to find them. Honestly, it might just be for ship upgrades later down the line to make jumping from star systems less of a hassle. During my selling spree, we meet the living embodiment of the word edgy. This is the Hunter. He wears all black, has a voice filter, likes to act mysterious, and crosses his arms when he talks to you, and I'm sure he has no significance on the plot whatsoever. With my sightseeing finished, we make our way to the lodge to drop off the artifact, as well as to meet the other members of Constellation. Right now, that includes Sarah, Mateo, Noel, and 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. We combine our artifacts together, which causes them to start floating around aimlessly. The others believe there must be more to the set, and that it's time to follow up on some leads to track them down. This does present a small issue I have with the game when it comes to doing restricted runs like this. For the first half of the story, you're almost always accompanied by another member of Constellation. They're not all that useful in combat in the beginning, so I can thankfully kinda just push on past and deal with the enemies myself, and just ignore their presence for the most part. Just thought I'd bring this up now for those unfamiliar with the game, in case y'all thought I was just bringing them along by my own accord. Also, because I know someone will bring it up, yes, I am aware of the trick to get the armor that is in the basement early by pixel peeking through this gap between the cabinet and the door. I am doing it for this run and then never again. Hopefully this way, people won't ask me to keep getting it in future runs. Plus, it's entirely possible it gets patched at some point in the near future. Sarah's contact at the Vanguard points us towards another contact on Mars who is currently MIA. Fortunately enough, we can Oblivion speech minigame our way to the information. I'm going to be very real here, speech in this game is about as broken as Fallout New Vegas, by which I mean you can quite literally use it to skip a bunch of encounters, including the final boss fights. So to that end, I'm not going to abuse it outside of some convenience, such as skipping a few lines of dialogue or skipping a fetch quest if possible. The info we get from this leads to a satellite near Venus, which we need to scan for information. It is surrounded by enemy ships, but thankfully there is a kinda ship stealth mechanic, sort of. You can activate ship stealth by just powering down most of your systems, which allows you to go unnoticed on most of the radars, which I guess here's hoping they don't look out a window. Once we have our info and have successfully avoided ship combat, we can follow said info to the star yard at Earth's moon. Continuing with this wild chase of goose, the man we are looking for is not here either. We are greeted, however, by Ecliptic Mercs and Spacers. They are essentially two different factions of space bandits. The Ecliptic put up the strongest resistance yet out of anything I've fought so far. Personally, I welcome the struggle. Up till now, the laser was doing far better than I'd ever imagined. In an odd way, it's nice to see it not delete their health bars in an instant. It was during this firefight I started experimenting with the cutter. No, not like that. I mean, rather than just constantly holding down the trigger for a continuous beam, I tried mashing the trigger rapidly. It got results still, and in fact, even after the recording, I'm still not quite sure if it might be better or not. Someone smarter than me, who likes testing weapons in these games under different circumstances, will probably come up with the answer to that. Once the last of the mercs are down, we locate yet another message from Waldo, pointing us towards Neptune. Sure enough, we get there and can see his ship, but of course, once we get close enough, it begins to attack. Luckily this time we don't have to blow him up, rather we just shoot out his engines so we can board the vessel, seeing how it has already been taken over by more of the mercenaries from before. And yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do with space combat in these runs. It's very clear that you cannot skip some of these encounters. Is the run successful or failed? That's up to you to decide. Anyway, we quickly dispatch them once we get aboard and can finally meet the man himself. After a brief chat, he lets us have the artifact piece that he found, because as he puts it, he was using it as a hood ornament. That quest was honestly quite long, but to be fair, it was in a way kind of an extended tutorial, just it was teaching the player about things like ship stealth, companions just outside of combat, and the effects of disabling specific parts of an enemy ship during dogfights. Returning to the lodge after this to add yet another fine addition to our collection, things begin to open up a little bit as we now have 3 different quests we can tackle in any order we choose. One of these quests involves Adam Jensen here, where we need to track down another artifact, this time one near Aquila City, on a planet named after Sonny Smiles' dog from New Vegas. I tell him to get his cowboy butt on the ship, but for now I have more pressing matters to attend to. By which I mean one of my other quests is closer, so I'm going to start it first to try and cut down on the backtracking, if even a little bit. This has me heading to the Eye, Constellation satellite base floating around the planet. Not much to do here other than talk to Vladimir, who for all intents and purposes is just our next quest giver, as he wants us to check up on a few more leads. But more importantly to him, try and find Andrea, another member of the group who he hasn't heard from in quite some time. Once more, this quest is getting put on the back burner, as I also want to track down Barrett from the opening, as he has gone radio silent after giving me his ship. As we last saw him on Vectera, that's where we're off to now. This time to actually start a quest, I promise. Things get a little funky in orbit as I find a ship that is currently in the process of blending any crew on board. There's not much on the surface of the planet other than Lynn, who was our old supervisor for a grand total of 10 minutes, who lets us access a terminal where we can find an audio transmission from Barrett that I can use to triangulate his position. Okay, there's also a unique variant of the cutter in the game here as well. It's Heller's cutter. The only difference is in the fact that it does an extra 20% damage to robots. I'm not going to use it, but I figured I'd pick it up anyway, just so I could mention it for those that don't know about it. Or those that would inevitably ask me about it in the comments. We follow the coordinates to a nearby planet where we can find Heller, dying and cutterless. After a few checks, he points us towards Barrett. The Crimson Fleet from before caught up to Barrett yet again and have taken him prisoner at an abandoned research facility. The outside of the base is covered with pirates, which thankfully are substantially weaker than the Ecliptic Mercs we fought in our last quest with Sarah. The plan initially was to just ignore them, enter the building, and run off with Barret. But considering how feeble they are, I took the time to add their bodies to my laser kill count. There's not enough of them for us to max out and reach rank 4 in the perk, but we're getting very close to doing so. When we make our way indoors, things are weirdly friendly as Barret has made nice with the pirates. You see, he is the smooth talker of the group. Well, unfortunately for his newfound friends, persuasion is not my MO today, so a precision laser straight through the throat is about all they can expect from me. Oddly enough, the pirate leader is the weakest of the crew, sitting at a laughable level 2. With the day saved, I take Barret back to the lodge to finish up the quest, and as a result, reach level 8. Like I mentioned before, I am close to becoming a laser master, so I just hold on to the perk until the time comes that I can use it. The rest of my perks are going towards defense-based things, by the way, just in case you're curious. Don't want to bother bringing up every single perk point, as like in Fallout, it gets kind of redundant. Well, since I'm just off playing babysitter for Barret, I decide to head off and find Andrea as well. She can be in one of 2 locations, however, this is not a situation that if you know which one she's at, you can just not visit the other, as both locations contain artifacts, so we'll have to visit them both sooner or later. I head up the one that she's not at first, which leads to an encounter with more of a ruined zealots. I won't lie, they pack quite a punch. This is mainly down to me not having a lot in the way of energy resistance yet, and that being their entire shtick. Well, other than worshipping some sort of snake, which, I mean, I guess we may have more in common than I thought if that's the case. I'm able to persevere thanks to the 3 Ps, patience, persistence, and pharmaceutical supplies, legal and otherwise. Once the last in the caves are dealt with, we grab yet another shiny object and hightail it back to our ship to jump to location number 2. I ran into what was essentially the magic school bus on my way, and let's just say these kids are very lucky I am trying my best to use my ship's weapons sparingly. Arriving at the abandoned mine, and for once from the outset it does appear to be so, as I am not immediately jumped by space pirates. Inside the mine, we do find Andrea finally, who seems no worse for wear. Turns out the cave has a handful of mercenaries inside, which is fine by me, as there is just enough of them to reach my very specific little quota, allowing me to access the final rank of the lasers perk. While every other rank added 10% of the overall damage of the laser, the final rank adds a 5% chance to ignite an enemy instead. Initially, I wasn't too thrilled by it, but then I used it, and the realization very quickly set in. Due to the laser being this constant beam of energy, the rate at which it applies fire is insane. It's pretty much guaranteed. Also helping matters is that these fire DOTs seem to stack indefinitely. I know I mentioned near the start about how the mining laser was melting enemies, but that could literally not be more accurate now. Even the legendary Ecliptic Merc with 3 health bars just drops in a matter of seconds. Granted, there is still the chance that the weapon's damage will just drop off later anyway due to the game's scaling, but as for now, the cutter has advanced from a little mining tool to a pocket flamethrower with infinite ammo, and I could not be prouder. With one more sparkly under my belt, in a similar way to Barret, I take Andrea back to the lodge, where she leaves my party and grants me another level. With the laser skill now maxed out, the rest of my points, like I said before, will most likely be focusing on the wellness and social trees. Wellness obviously has perks that increase my overall damage resistances and health, which is always welcome, whereas social, yes, I'll need to essentially waste a few perk points on skills I won't be using, but eventually I can have access to this game's version of the Lone Wanderer perk, which, just like in Fallout 4, gives me a damage and defense increase when traveling alone. It's not as effective as Fallout 4 simply due to how many quests have you buddying up with Constellation members, but I can still think of a few scenarios in the later half of the story where it will pull its own weight. Anyway, back to the plot. I hope Cowboy Co is comfortable on my ship, because I am once again putting off his quest to go help out Vladimir. Gonna skim past this one pretty quickly, as while it is a main quest, it technically leads into a side quest that is part of the story that I don't have to do, especially given that I cannot even use the main part of it for this run. Basically, every artifact that you'll collect from here on out will start marking a location on a random planet. Going to these locations then leads us to a giant temple. Inside said temple, we have to do this little flying thing where we have to go through all the stars or something. I really don't know what the point of it is, but basically you do all that, enter the mini Halo ring, and then get granted a dragon shout. The game calls them powers, but they are dragon shouts. Most of them even share the effects of shouts in Skyrim, like there's one that slows down time, makes you silent, blows people over, etc, etc. The first one we get is an anti-gravity field, which is cool, but ultimately not something we'll be using with the cutter. I am curious if a powers only run is technically possible. Most of them seem to just aid in some way as opposed to directly applying damage, although there are a select few which can be used to hurt. We'll put that in the maybe pile for now. Alright, with that out of the way, now I can finally help Sam out with his problems. When we land, he informs me that he is the descendant of Solomon Coe, the man who found Aquila City, and that this could make things in town a little awkward. It really doesn't, if I'm being honest, but before entering the town proper, I do buy a few quick upgrades for the ship. Nothing major, just a better reactor and shields should I need them. We have to head to the bank to find some old maps as me and Sam are going on a treasure hunt for, you guessed it, another artifact. Alright, so yeah, elephant in the room, things are getting a tad repetitive in regards to the base objectives of the story. Like 90% of the main quests are just find artifact. But if I were to compare it to anything, and something I replayed actually like 3 days ago, it's almost like hunting down the star maps in KOTOR 1. Now before you say anything, yes, KOTOR 1 is a much better game. Okay? Okay. What I'm trying to say is while all your main objectives are technically the same thing, that being find X item, the journey to the item is different each time. Granted, KOTOR has far less of the mandatory MacGuffins, leading to it feeling less repetitive regardless. Back on topic, the bank is currently closed due to a hostage situation, which is no good. I attempt to de-escalate the situation by talking down the suspects, but unfortunately I fail the minigame. Lucky for us, the Marshal does have a key that we can use to sneak our way in the back. Well, we are as sneaky as one can be with a giant spacesuit and a laser beam. After some justice-induced murder, me and Sam learn that the maps have been removed by none other than his father, the mayor. The two aren't exactly on the best of terms, but that somewhat works to our advantage, as Sam can argue with his old man long enough for me to steal the maps and we can be on our way. Right before we follow the map, I notice that the hunter is back and he is yet again in the nearby tavern. He may have a drinking problem, but that doesn't bother me. What does is that something about his stance makes me feel like he's checking me out underneath that EVA helmet of his. Once we follow the map, we end up at another cave. This time, the Shaw gang stand in our way. It's the same gang of ruffians that tried to rob the bank earlier. Problems arise for them immediately, as since I got this quest so long ago, I'm gonna assume the quest scaled to my level when I accepted it, as opposed to the level that I am now. I say this as a majority of them are in the range of levels 2 to 6, so not incredibly threatening. There are some robots here that pack a little more of a punch, but most of them try to run up and hook you in the face, so staying at range deals with that problem, or as far as range as I can with this thing. We get what we came for, but then suddenly Shaw herself shows up to confront us. Figured this would happen, given that we have murdered most of her gang by this point. The real issue is not her, but rather the Ashta, these adorable little lizard creatures that begin to attack us and the Shaws. While I'm glad they are chaotic evil and just wish to kill everybody, I am less excited by the fact they seem to be highly resistant to energy damage. That's literally my whole thing. To make matters worse, they also hit decently hard for the size of them. I hate to say it, but given the circumstances, these are probably some of the deadliest enemies I shall face this entire run. On the bright side, if I am fortunate enough to get the multiple fire procs, things get a lot better. Returning to the lodge to drop off the mystical plastic, and now Reagan wants to go on a quest to get one that he knows about that is currently in the city of Neon. We're just gonna try and buy this one, so no bloodshed. Yeah, okay. Arriving at Neon, we meet up with Ronald's wife so we can get permission to spend some money. While he does that, we go and case the joint where the transaction will be taking place. With some smooth words, and by which I mean credits haphazardly slid across the table, we can pay off the club's guards and get access to the security system. I spend a little time walking around Neon, mainly to get info on the buyer, when of course, he appears.
Be sure you never find yourself on the wrong end of a bounty.
By Vectera, by Vectera, by Vectera! I can't believe it!
By this stage, I had genuinely forgotten that I'd taken this trait, so this came as quite a shock. I don't know what to do with him, so I just send him off to be part of my non-existent private crew. With everyone on our side, as well as a locked door that quite literally is keeping him trapped in here with us, we can happily complete the transaction and leave. Except things do not go so smoothly. As the artifact was stolen from a rather powerful man on Neon named Slayton, we are now trapped in the city until we deal with that. Now, I know we can just stealth our way through this section and then come to an agreement at the end, but I did that on my first casual run and figured I would try my hand at slaughter. You know, for fun. Long story short, it worked a treat. With Slayton and his thugs and employees dealt with, we can head back to the except wait, there is an ominous floating ship just waiting for us. This is the Starborn, they demand the artifacts, we naturally decline, and a fight ensues. Now, you are told to fire up the grav drive and just flee, which takes all of a few seconds to do. But that's only one option. If you want, you can just fight the ship and it's not even that tough. Remember, other than a few minor upgrades, I am still in a mostly unmodified version of the Frontier, which is the starting ship. I was going to bring up this cool method about how there was a quick trick to beating the Starborn here that involves shutting down the ship's engines, as that's what happened on my first playthrough. But I tried that here and it didn't seem to work, as the fight continued until I dealt a specific amount of damage and they had to retreat. Regardless of what option you pick, we drop our purchase back at the lodge and have a rather lengthy discussion about what the Starborn are. That is before continuing on our merry way to go digging for more of their artifacts. The next few are all rather similar, so here's the Cliff Notes version. While fighting some more Varun zealots, one of them dropped a new legendary helmet that is going to prove very useful for extra damage, as it has the Headhunter effect, which allows me to do an extra 25% damage on any attack after a headshot. This means I'm going to just do a whole heap of damage now if I can keep that laser focused on somebody's head. Speaking of laying on the pain, from this point on, every time we go to get another unclaimed artifact, they'll be guarded by a Starborn. They are supposed to be tough encounters, but I think the footage speaks for itself. It really sucks for them that one of their main tactics is to attack you while invisible. Kinda hard to do that when you're engulfed in flames. That fire perk is honestly nuts with the cutter. It almost makes me wish I'd used it in my first playthrough. Dropping these two other artifacts off, and now some of the members are beginning to question why we're doing this, and I mean, yes, same, but there's no real time to think about that, as I agree to help Vlad fix up some problems with the eye. Nothing much to go over, just chatting with some of the other members, along with interacting with certain objects. Once the repairs are out of the way, we are informed of another artifact. This one, however, has been taken by somebody else. Vladimir states he already attempted to negotiate a price for it, but it is apparently not for sale. Regardless, me and Barrett, I suppose because he's the smooth talker, make our way over to the Scow, the ship and crew, who obtain the artifact in an attempt to work out some sort of deal. Out of curiosity and for fun, I did the old drop a quick save and murder everyone. Figured, like most Bethesda games, I'd probably be able to kill most of the guards, but their head honcho would be unkillable until the quest was complete. That is not the case this time around, it seems. I mean, it's a little more involved than just sneaking aboard and swiping the thing, but hey, I'll take it. I even get some new clothes as well, not that you'll ever see them, as I'm more of a spacesuit stays on during sex kind of guy. Sure, I can put that in the script. Returning to the lodge, and things aren't as happy-go-lucky as usual. Vladimir is calling from the Eye, and he informs us that a Starborn attacked everyone on board, and that Sam is currently dying. Better yet, the Starborn in question is Mr. Edge himself from earlier, and he is on his way to the lodge. From here, we have two choices. We can either stay and defend the lodge, or head to the Eye and check up on the others. I choose to head for the Eye, as the choice you make here determines the fate of one of your companions. Basically, whoever Vlad says is bleeding out over the intercom will die if you don't head for the Eye. But if you do swing by to make sure they're alright, someone at the lodge will bite the bullet instead. The companion on the Eye will be whoever you have the highest affinity with, and the one who stays at the lodge will be whoever you have the second highest affinity with. From what I've gathered, for most people, Barrett is normally one of the two choices, as I believe you get some affinity with him from the start of the game, and when you save him from the kidnappers. I guess that Sam was my highest because I had him hanging around on my ship for so long while doing literally everything but his quest. Anyway, after the routine checkup, me and Sam return to the lodge to find Barrett has indeed died due to my actions, or inaction I suppose. Fortunately, Noelle escaped with the artifacts into the sewers, although she didn't get very far, and as a result, right after we meet up with her, the hunter appears to finish the job. I was determined to at the very least down him once here, but he does not seem to be taking even a smidge of damage. I find that incredibly odd because in my first playthrough, I literally knocked him unconscious multiple times with my unarmed build with little to no effort. Fine, if I cannot kill him, I'll just retreat. You may be thinking that, well, if the hunter can seemingly teleport at will, how in the hell do I hope to get away from him? Simple.
I'm fast as fuck, boy. Still fast as fuck, boy.
Once in orbit, the hunter is seemingly waiting for us yet again, and name drops the Armillary, the name of the full set of the artifacts once they're combined. He wishes to enjoy the cat and mouse game for a while longer, so he leaves us and lets us keep the pieces we have for now. Taking what we have to the Eye, Vlad and Noelle suggest that the hunter was able to find the artifacts so easily as they weren't exactly hiding them in the first place at the lodge, and that we should probably think about changing that. We have two options here. We can either build an outpost to store them at, or keep them on board my ship. I will be blunt. I have had way more than my fill of settlements in Fallout 4 that even 3 months after launch I have yet to truly dabble in that side of Starfield. And spoiler, I am not going to start today. The only downside the game warns you about in keeping them on your ship is you will be attacked more frequently by Starborn. To that I say, good. They can most certainly try. Because every member of the crew needs at least one thing to do to make their inclusion in the story somewhat meaningful, finally Matteo, the religious one in the group, offers to help out by asking Keeper Aquilus, a priest of the Sanctum Universum, for some advice on what the Hunter said before he beat everyone senseless. The long and short of it is, we relay the information we have to the man, he sends us to talk with 2 other people in New Atlantis for some perspective on the matter, and then once we return to him, we can pool all of our knowledge to get a set of coordinates leading to the planet of Indum 2. This is the point where the story kind of focuses on fleshing out some things and answering questions you've probably had up until this stage, so like before, I'll try to skim over most of it for the sake of time. Landing on the planet, we can find the writings of an ancient Starborn called the Pilgrim. After studying his texts, we can then jot down our answers in his computer that then gives us yet another location to travel to, as we need to locate something referred to as the Scorpion Sting. For the first time in a while, I encounter some hostile wildlife and can briefly go back to the point of this run. That of course being the disintegration of anything that looks at me funny. Past the hostiles, I can interact with this floating glyph, which after pushing the correct buttons gives me, yet again, another set of coordinates. In the end, it all just leads me back to the Hunter and another Starborn, the Emissary. 2 things. The Emissary is the one that tried to stop us outside of Neon earlier, you know, the one that we could very easily blow out of the sky with our default ship, and he is also Barrett, our dead companion. Although, he's not actually our Barrett, he is in fact from a different universe. We also learn that the Hunter is the priest from before, also from another universe. After questioning them for a bit, they explain that the artifacts, or more accurately, the armillary, is a device that you can pass through to the center of the universe, where in which you will be reborn in another universe and will be made Starborn. Both the Emissary and the Hunter have done this multiple times. It is in fact the reason why the Hunter let you go before when we escaped him at the Lodge, as he claims in almost all other universes the player is the one who dies aboard the Eye, or at the Lodge, and the fact that I survived this time has essentially piqued his curiosity. After the discussion, the Emissary tells me to head to Earth's moon, as there are secrets there that I must uncover for myself. Our visit to the moon is a flyby and a half, as we really just need to listen to an audio log that points us towards the NASA headquarters back on Earth. If you're wondering what Earth is like, well, here it is. It's just a big old pile of sand and dust. I can't stand desert environments, they bore the hell out of me, so I have zero desire to be here and opt to speed through this as fast as I can. Inside the facility, we learn about the construction of the first grav drives, the things that let the ships jump from system to system. Well, basically, the original ones were not well optimized and over time began to destroy Earth's atmosphere. The designs for the first grav drive were found when one of the scientists interacted with an artifact that they'd found on Mars, and a version of him, I guess from another universe, gave him the designs for the original grav drives. I'm pretty sure that's the basics. Hopefully I didn't get it wrong. There's a lot of speculation out there about all of this, like how Victor, the man who built the grav drives, may in fact be another version of the Hunter or something. But we're not about to dive into all that, so I just grab the trinket, and after some more Starborn gloriously fail to stop me, I leave. Speaking of Starborn, outside, the Hunter and the Emissary, yet again, are waiting for me. They want me to pick a side in their conflict, to which I say, to hell with that, I'll take you all on. In fact, I'll do it right now. Knowing how these games work, I drop a quick save first and proceed to throw down. I start by focusing the Hunter, as I figured he'd be the stronger out of the two. And that wasn't the case at all. But more importantly, and I know I have harped on this quite a few times throughout the run, but I really gotta stress just what the hell is up with fire damage. Look, it just decimates his health bar. The Hunter is meant to be one of the final bosses, and let alone I'm fighting him before I'm meant to here, and by all rights should be weaker than I will be at the end, and yet there goes his life force disappearing into the wind. Naturally, however, this is a Bethesda game and I cannot kill him. Same goes for the Emissary as well, who was just as easy, if not easier, thanks to me taking enough damage during the fight to take the final rank of the energy dissipation perk, which will now give me a 25% chance to reflect energy damage back at my attacker, so long as I am below 50% health. Now, to be real, normally unkillable NPCs don't bother me all that much, as I would rather play through a game's quest than go full murder hobo, despite what some of my actions at Gamora may indicate, but this right here genuinely confuses me more than annoys. The reason being, I only have one more mission to do before the final showdown with these two anyway, so what difference does it make whether they die here and I do the final two quests in reverse order? At the very least, let me goad them into a fight here, and that way, if I win, they can retreat to the final area anyway, and then maybe even scale them up if the game thinks they're too easy. Mini rant over, I return to the lodge for the final time, where they then tell me they're going to be holding a funeral for Barrett. I think that's a wonderful idea, and then proceed to not show up as I'm busy with other things. The journey to collecting the final artifact that's not in possession of any Starborn is one of the more unique quests in the story with a fun gimmick. Totally unrelated question, y'all ever played Titanfall 2's campaign? We find that for once a facility has not been abandoned, and in fact the people are very much alive and running experiments on the artifact. Naturally, this has caused things to get weird. Not only has it created a separate universe, one where only one person died in an explosion in the laboratory and another where everyone but one person died, I am currently phasing between the two seemingly at random. After playing hopscotch through the multiverse for a bit, one of the scientists in the very much still alive world figures out a way for me to manipulate which universe I'm in at will, so long as I can find a specific access point to access the other universe. It makes for a pretty enjoyable quest. Rather than your usual run through the designated building to the endpoint, you do have to at least stop, find and think about which access points to go through. Plus, for me, it was way more beneficial to remain on the destroyed side. The creatures there were just much weaker to my cutter than the hostile robots back in the other world. This culminates with of course needing to remove the artifact from the reality, but in doing so you will shut off the connection between the two realities, so in the end it's up to you which one you ultimately wish to remain in your universe, with goodness knows what happening to the other. I ended up staying with the rundown Dead Space looking universe. Again, I was already more comfortable fighting the bugs there than the robots, so was spending more time there to begin with, plus Raphael, the sole survivor, was just a lot nicer to me than the scientists in the other lab. Now it was time for the end. First off, I decided to make some brief adjustments to the frontier, mostly cosmetic, but I would also need a more powerful grav drive in order to reach the planet that the Hunter and Emissary are waiting for me on with the rest of the pieces.
Well, you finally showed up. Shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight.
All cruisers fire at will. Burn their mongrel hides.
The trick was to abuse the targeting system, which is basically just VATS from Fallout. Not only does it allow me to take out systems on the ship that will prove troublesome, but the fact that it slows down time as well makes it great for dishing out the damage on a single target in a quick manner, while also providing a moment of respite from other Starborn intent on tearing my ship in two. Once the ships retreat, I make my way for the surface and have to push through the gauntlet of Starborn mini-bosses. The first one's gimmick is he creates clones of himself, all using a variety of weapons. Now, I assume this is the classic figure out which one is real, and once you do, the rest will go down as well. But, truth be told, I just lasered them all one at a time until I got hit with a little tick that let me know that I can move on. The next Starborn can revive the dead, in this case a swarm of underleveled, underprepared, ecliptic mercenaries. Same as before, I could Phantom Menace them by taking her out first, but given their lack of health, taking half a second to rinse them before swatting her aside didn't bother me in the slightest. Alright, numbers 3 and 4, it's a 2-on-1 scenario. It's not as difficult as you might expect, especially as I've already proven myself capable of taking down the Hunter and Emissary at the same time, so what hope do they have? Answer, none. They do activate all of the facility's robots, which honestly were more trouble than them. This would have been a really good time to let Heller's cutter loose, but I forgot it was even a thing I had. I should mention between these battles I am getting transported around to other dimensions again. This includes reliving a part of the intro on Vectera, along with murdering everyone on the sky again, and seeing my own corpse cradled in the inviting beefy arms of Vladimir. After this, there's just one more Starborn before the big finale, and you guessed it, like the others, he has a small army's worth of backup. The catch this time is that they're all duplicates of the player. So in a weird way, the better prepared you are for the final fight, the harder this one will be. Consider for a moment that I am using a mining laser, and as far as I can tell, they do not get access to any of my perks. I also have an exceptionally high energy resistance now thanks to said perks along with my spacesuit, meaning the lasers barely even tickle me. In fact, the most annoying part about them is that there are so many they can make it difficult to focus at times. It does make tackling the Starborn Fion here less of a challenge, which is nice. Well, it is either Fionn, or Finn, depends on which part of Ireland you're from in terms of pronunciation, but I went to school with a guy who was called Fionn, so that's how I'm going to say it. Now finally it was time for the final encounter. I've heard them spout enough at this point, so I just get straight into the fight. They are tougher than they were on Earth, or at least the Emissary is anyway. The Emissary has seemingly every Starborn power at his disposal here, from duplication, invisibility, teleportation, and all kinds of offensive powers. The Hunter, on the other hand, is, I guess, what you'd call a more traditional or physical fighter, as he seems to just want to shoot me, and there's also only one of him. Naturally, I just focus him first, and he is out of the picture after the first jump. Yeah, just like the previous mission, we're hopping around realities again. The Hunter dies in the lodge, which is rather poetic, and then it's just me versus the 4 or 5 emissaries. Annoyingly, the emissary always seems to teleport or jump the instant you start doing any real damage to him, so it kinda causes the fight to drag on for a bit. It's even more annoying whenever he activates a power that gives him extra armor. Sometimes he'll use a weaker version that just ups his defenses. When that happens, I can't deal with it. But whenever he uses the moon version that seemingly makes him impervious to all types of damage and serves nothing but to literally pause the fight for 10 seconds, I become irritated. We continue hopping from story location to story location until finally we end up back at NASA. There may not be any kind of luck stat in Starfield, as far as I'm aware, but the only way to describe the ending of this fight is that I got incredibly lucky. I'm guessing at this point right here, I just stacked up an absurd amount of fire damage all at once, as while he seems to have a decent amount of health left before he teleports, only a few seconds later, before I can even clock where he is, I hear him struggling to talk, before finally noticing he's on his knees before passing away. All I can say is fire is OP and needs nerfed, but also don't nerf it, it's a single player game and it makes the cutter viable, and that is hilarious. Looting both of their corpses gets me the last handful of artifacts and allows me to build the armillary. Before heading through to Universe 2, I can say my farewells, so I do so for the only companion that matters. Once the device is constructed, I simply fire up the grav drive and boom, center of the universe. I meet an old familiar face when I'm there who informs me of what will happen when I pass through. It's New Game Plus. He is describing a New Game Plus, but in a literal sense. So I hop through, get greeted by a frankly pretty shot of the universe, wake up in New Game Plus with my swanky new suit, finishing the game and proving yes, you can indeed beat Starfield with only the cutter. Sort of. Ship combat is still up in the air if that counts against it or not. Oh, that was fun. Honestly, it was just very refreshing to play a new Bethesda game on the channel for the first time in a long time. I know Fallout 76 is a thing, but after trying again and again to record something, I still can't find the enjoyment in it to want to finish a run. I'm sorry. The interesting part about New Game Plus being a thing that exists is it does open up the question in a way for runs that involve it, as it does skip the entire tutorial segment on Vectera. Plus, if you get rid of the Starborn suit and ship, you technically start with even less than you would have on a fresh save. I suppose the only issue is not having a way to respec your skills, plus being above level 1. Although I think I actually have an idea around that, but that is a potential video in and of itself for another time. For now, this has gone on long enough, and if I keep typing, this video is not going to be done for Christmas. Regardless, that's going to be the end of this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like. If you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe as I try to run these videos out fairly frequently. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.